In today's exercise, we're going to use blocks in SOLIDWORKS. So you want to get the transmission folder copied over to your drive so you can use it. And then you'll open a new part. Once you're in the part, you turn the planes on. Select the front plane and open a sketch. In the sketch, you'll go up to Tools, Blocks, Insert. Click Browse, and you want to get the gears block. So you open up that block, click and place it. SOLIDWORKS will let you put in as many of the blocks as you want. You only want one for this one. Then you're going to drag one of these points over to the right plane and let it go. And then you need to put a dimension in off the center plane. And that's going to be 10 millimeters. So now you have your block positioned. So to explain what this is this is a crankshaft and then an input transmission shaft. This would be the clutch assembly up here, and this would be the output shaft, and the drive gear would come out, or the drive sprocket would come out this side. So what we're going to, all of these represent meshing gears at their ideal gear ratios. So this would be first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. The first part we're going to make out of this is the crankshaft. So I'm going to exit this sketch. It's important to exit the sketch. Now make sure you have your block in one sketch and then you open up a new sketch. I'll do it here with the revolve. So I have two sketches open. So now I'm going to go in and convert all my entities. Select Convert Entities. Then this one is going to be the center axis of the crankshaft. So that needs to be a little bit longer. I'm going to select Trim and cut off everything that's on that side. I'm going to take out the center pieces that I don't need. And now I've got a decent section for a revolve. Check OK, go to exit the sketch, select the axis I want to use for the revolve. Check OK. So now I have the two big flywheel portions of the crankshaft. I need to put the wrist pin in now. So I'm going to open another revolve, select that plane. Then I want to do more converting of entities. Trim off what I don't need. Check OK. Go and exit out of this one. This I need to select that line. So now I have the crankshaft. This would be where the rod bearing attaches. These would be the two main bearings for the crankshaft, and this is the primary gear reduction coming off the end of the crankshaft. So the last thing I'm going to do is adjust the color of the crankshaft part. So I'll do that, and then I'm going to go File, Save. And this I want to have in my directory. You'll put it in your flash drive. Sometimes this may take a while. Create a new folder for this assembly, Lab 12. And then save this as crankshaft. Now I basically used this sketch. A gear designer would generate the sketch of all the gears and the layout of the pieces, and then I'm putting this into 3 dimensions because I want to do the rest of the crankcase layout. So that's that part. I'll close, file, save, and then I'll close the crankshaft part. I'll open up a new one. Turn on my planes. Click on the front plane, open a sketch, and it'll go up to Tools, Blocks, Insert, browse for my block, and I'm going to get that out of the directory that it's in, transmission directory. And I want the gears block, and I'll bring that block in again. Last time, if you recall, I lined up the center of the crankshaft with the XY axis. This time I'm going to line up the center of the driven shaft of the crank, of the transmission. And then here I need my 10mm offset. Check OK. Now, I'm going to click on the front plane and open a new sketch. So remember, 2 sketches here, because I'm pulling all this geometry right out of the layout block. And then I'm going to start converting entities. Putting that in to represent my shaft, the shaft of the transmission. And I forgot that I needed to bring one of these over, so do that as well. And then do some trimming. And I need to trim out all these internals. And now I'm ready to do my revolve. Now normally there'd be shift forks that adjust these gears back and forth, or in other style transmissions there'll be synchronizers in between them. And this is a synchronous gear set. Check OK. Exit that sketch, go up and select my revolve. And now I have that assembly. Last thing I want to do is change the color. Go to Appearance. Drag the color bar around a little bit. Check OK. And then File, Save. And this one's going to be Trans Drive Shaft. We'll close that part, open a new part, turn on my planes, go to the transmission directory, select the gear plane again, or the gear block again, bring my block in. This last one, I'm going to bring the center axis of the driven shaft over, line that up, and I still need my 10mm offset for off of one of the crank cheeks. Exit that sketch, select the front plane, open a revolve on that, and then I'm going to start converting entities again. And then it's time to trim. And then I need to clean out the inside as well. Okay, I'll check OK. Exit my sketch, select that edge for the revolve, and I have the driven shaft for the transmission. Last thing I'm going to do is go in here, go to Appearance, and pick a different color. File, save, and this will be trans driven shaft. Okay. Close that. Now I'm going to create an assembly. So I'm going to go New, Assembly, OK. And I'm going to bring in the crankshaft part. So I have the crankshaft part in place. It's the first part I brought into my assembly, so if you notice it's fixed right now. I can go up to View and turn off sketches, and that'll hide the rest of the gear block. But the other thing I want to do is I want to line it up with the assembly so I can allow it to rotate, even though it's the first component that's coming in. So I want to go View, turn on planes, so my planes are now there. I'm going to insert reference geometry axis. I want to insert an axis between the right and the front plane of the assembly. Once I've created that axis, I'm going to allow the crankshaft to float. Then I'm going to align the two right planes with a mate constraint. So they're now coincident. Check OK. Then I'm going to click on the bearing journal and select that axis that I created. I guess I have to make sure that I did create it. Yeah, there it is. I want to mate that to the bearing journal. It'll show up as coincident, but we want concentric. Now the reason I would do that is even though I'm putting in my crankshaft first, I want to be able to rotate the crankshaft later in the assembly when I would be designing the rod and the cylinder and such. Okay, so now those are in. I can go ahead and turn off. I can hide all types. And I'm going to bring in the next part. So I'll bring in the drive shaft for the transmission. And then these two gears mate. So I'm going to select, hit Control, Control, Mate. And then if you notice, right now, coincident selected, you want to do tangent. So I'll make those two tangent. Check OK. And then I'll line up the end of the gears and check OK. So now when this is rotating, this outer gear, which would be the outer gear of the clutch, is rotating. When the clutch is engaged, this shaft will be rotating too. So I'll check OK there. Then I'll bring in the driven shaft of the transmission. So the next thing we have to mate, we'll mate the driven transmission shaft in there. I'll select those two faces, check OK, and then I want to mate these two gear faces together. Now remember, you have to do tangent there instead of concentric. So now what you have is you have all of the gears lined up in a row. This isn't very space conscious. So what a designer would do at this point, or a layout designer would do at this point, is they'd try to move these around to get them into a configuration that they feel is more advantageous. So really, the only thing that you have to worry about when moving them around is you don't want to cause anything that will cause one of the shafts to hit the crankshaft. So that is our moved around assembly. I'm going to move it around a little bit more. So that's a pretty efficient packing of the gears right there. All right, so with them in this position, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open a sketch on the top plane of the assembly, which would form my crankshaft splitting plane. And I'm going to grab the outer geometry of these gears and convert those entities. So I kind of want to grab the three biggest circles. We'll do something a little special with the clutch. So anyway, so I got those three largest circles. Then I'm going to go up to Tools, Blocks, and Make. And I'll drag a box around everything. Check OK. And I want to save this as profile block. And click Save. So now I'm going to open a new part. Turn on all my planes. Select the front plane. Open a sketch. And then I'm going to insert, Tools, Blocks, Insert, that profile. So now I've got the profile of the transmission. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this over on top of the origin, and I'll put in a dimension down here to the output shaft, and then that block's constrained. I'll back out of that, open a new sketch, select this block, do an offset of a 1/2 inch. Offset that one a 1/2 inch, and offset this one a 1/2 inch. I'm going to check OK. And I also want to get this one here. Let the clutch wait a little bit. All right, so now I've got those selected. I'm going to draw a triangle around the whole thing. It doesn't have to connect back over here. And then we're going to add some relations for that. So those are going to be I want those to be tangent. This one should be tangent. Selected the wrong one on that one there. This one should be tangent. And that one should be tangent. 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 Check OK. Now I'm going to come in and trim this out. I accidentally went over one of the edges there. Don't do that. So just get everything that's inside. Okay. And then we want to extrude that. And we'll move that one out 0.5 inches. Got to make sure it's 0.5 inches. And we're going to save this as case. We're going to close that, and then we're going to come over here. We'll discard that sketch, and then we'll go, we will go Assembly, Insert Components, Browse, and we'll get the case part and bring it in. Okay, so now what do we want to line this up with? Well, I want to get it lined up with the right plane. And I want that to be the start of the left case half, so I'm going to line those up like that. Then I'm going to get this concentric with that, this one concentric with that, and this one concentric with that. Okay, so now we've got the start of a crankcase. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this part in the assembly. So I'm going to click on it, I'm going to go up to Edit Part. I need to save it. So this is going to be transmission. Now, once I'm editing the part, I can use geometry from my gears to make geometry in the other piece. So I'm going to start making a bunch of extrudes here. You might have to move it so you're not selecting geometry on your part to get the other pieces. So I'm going to do an offset of this. That'll be offset 0.5. And then I'm going to move that extrusion out until it clears the end of the crank cheek. So that's right about there. Then I'm going to I'll do this one next. So extrude. This one's going to come out. And I wanted to do an offset, not a convert with that. Select here, offset, leave it at 0.5. That's fine. Check OK. Bring that one can go back in because it just needs to clear the end of the gear. We'll do another one. To come out and cover this right here. So that one, I'll grab this edge, offset that, check OK, and then I'll just do that one this time, and then extrude that, move that out past the end. Then I need to do the same thing here with this gear. That one's going to be back off of this plane. So I'm going to put an extrude in off that plane. Select this edge. Offset. Check OK. My sketch. And that I'm going to bring out to there. The last thing I have to cover is this end crankshaft bearing here. Pick that up, go to extrude, get this edge here, do an offset, check OK, and then I want to bring that one out past the end of the gear. All right, so now I kind of have half my clearances set up for this end of my part. The next thing I'm going to do is a draft. So I'm going to select draft. I'm going to select the center neutral plane. And then I'm going to start selecting the faces, all the vertical faces, because this part would be a cast part that I need to have draft on. So once they're all selected, I'll leave that at 1 degree. I might change the direction and then check OK. And if you notice, now these parts are drafted. So if that draft wasn't enough, go in here and then go to Edit and bump that up to 2 degrees. The last thing I'm going to do is add fillets. Some of these you can add all at the same time. Some of them you have to do at different times. Some of those edges I couldn't get. Go back and get the other edges. Some edges SOLIDWORKS can't put the fillets on. And there you have the filleted, so it kind of looks like the side of a motorcycle transmission case. Once you had that in place, you could then shell the inside. If the shell errors, you might need to look at the faces. This right here is what's probably causing that shell to error, so I'll try and add some fillets in here. There we go. And I don't think I have any other sharp corners, so I'll try it again. The other thing you can do is drop the shell down to 80 thousandths. And there the shell worked. So if I go back and exit out of editing the component, I've now made the outside structure of the crankcase casting that would enclose all of those gears on that side. And you've got to see how you use blocks to create components. So that's it for this exercise.